we're being PHIs in a literal sense. And that's kind of where I found my tribe when I joined Phi Delta Theta. So if you can imagine, some of you weren't even born, but all the way back to, and Donald's going to laugh at this, but all the way back to 1998 in what was then a newly renovated 1378 Seymour Street. Literally, we had just finished rebuilding the place after years and years of neglect. Donald and many of the other alumni came together, did a major capital campaign, and tore the thing back to its studs, rebuilt it. I know that happened again with Matt Welsh and some of the work that he did in recent years. But here I was joining this group of guys. And let me tell you about Nova Scotia Alpha in 1998. Phi Delta Theta had just adopted the alcohol-free housing policy. And for many of our brethren, that was enough. They didn't want to be members and decided that that was it. So I joined a chapter as part of a pledge class of 4 men that took our chapter, Nova Scotia Alpha, from 8 guys to 12. So think about the numbers that you guys are actually managing with now. But we started that back then with literally 12 of us. And I came to Halifax and literally I was this goofy little, 5'4" brown kid who had never been to Nova Scotia ever, had no friends, no family, no connection. I literally don't even know exactly what brought me to Dalhousie anymore, but that's where I ended up. And so how did I go? And I'll tell you, the first thing, if you ask any of my pledge brothers, any of the other PHIs, then one of the things they're going to say about me when they first met me was, and I loved this presentation to begin things, was I was very much in my fake it till you make it phase, right? They actually would say that I wasn't necessarily authentic. They knew that I always seemed like I was trying to put on a show, that I was always trying to understand what the next thing was. And you know what? They were absolutely right. I hadn't figured out how to be authentic, how to be, the guy I am now. And hopefully I'm far more authentic. And here's the thing about being a misfit. It's going to happen over and over and over and over again. So if you can imagine 4 years later, after, my 4 years as an undergraduate, I get hired by Phi Delta Theta General Headquarters, and I go down to the States. Again, this is now 2002, a year before the Twin Towers fell in New York. Every time I walked into an airport, you can imagine what life was like for me. And I'm about to go work in the States, visiting university campuses across the northeastern United States. Let me tell you, you're going to be a misfit every couple of years, and that's the whole cycle. So how did I find my tribe? How do I keep finding my tribe? Well, let's talk about the idea of tribes in the first place. What is a tribe? Most people think about tribes as, groups of belonging, but I'm actually going to argue that it's something completely different. Tribes are about shared stories, shared experiences, the things that we experience with each other. I guarantee you that there are things that, that Donald experienced that I didn't, but also things that Donald experienced that I did, that helps us connect over the 10, 15, maybe 20 years that separate us from our undergraduate to the, to the experiences that you have that, separate us, between the 10, 20 years between your undergraduate experience and mine, that make us PHIs. Because tribes are about storytelling. They're about the things that we share with each other, because in those stories, there's a commonality. There's always going to be a commonality. And that's the thing that we're constantly looking for. When you go out into the workforce, most of you are going to be interviewing in the next couple of years, and you're going to deal with these, excuse my language, annoying as bleep, interviews of, tell me about a time when. Literally, all you're being asked is, hey, you know what? Tell me a story about your experience, about how you experienced something that might relate to us. Because if you want to join our tribe, and our tribe is a tribe that's based on work, then we need to know that you have a similar story, or at least understand stories the way that we do. Tribes help us navigate a world that's too big for us to understand, and they help us act on that world by helping us form a picture in our head of how we might act. And we have a bunch of them. And so as a lifelong misfit, I'll tell you, there's something to be gained in that. And that takes us to the second presentation, which again I loved, this idea of the threshold. And I remember standing outside the door of 1378 Seymour before I walked in for the first time thinking, what the hell am I doing? Right? And so many of you have probably had that experience or know somebody that had that experience. And every single one of you is, even while we're recruiting virtually, going to talk to somebody that's having that experience. There's 1,000 things that I think I understand about fraternalism, but I'm standing at this doorstep and I don't know if I want to cross that threshold. And what's going to make me cross it? I'll tell you, the most important thing that you can do as a member of, in your own misfit way, is actually embrace exactly that. Hey, you know what? I stood at that threshold too. So rather than me inviting you in, I'm going to step out the door and walk in with you, right? Let's do it together. And that was one of the things that I learned after 4 years of being an undergraduate phi. It was the weirdest thing. Learning how to ask for help was the most important thing I ever learned. And it's how I begin to find my tribe. And I came away after my years with Phi Delta with 3 really important principles, and they're related to the cardinal principles, but 3 principles that still managed my life. I manage my life today. First one is seek out your purpose. And purpose is broader than just, some easy phrase that, sounds like make more money in the end, which is how a lot of purpose statements sound like. It's about that one thing that you do. Mine is I solve human puzzles, right? I base my entire life, my entire career, and all my relationships on that one thing. Everything's because I'm so passionate about puzzles. That's what everything is for me, and I treat life that way, and it's how I've found success. Second principle, and this one again, being a member of a fraternity. For those of you who are officers, those of you who have had to deal with judicial boards, for those of you who have done a run by higher education, here's a big one for you. Simplicity by nature is complex. It's incredibly difficult. It takes a ton of work to take something really, really complicated and make it sound easy. I know this because I spent my years as a consultant not only talking to other FIs, but talking to people outside about fraternalism and trying to help people understand that the idea of quote unquote buying your friends is not really all that uncommon in everything you do in the world. Anytime you've gone out to the bar and bought somebody a pint that you didn't know and struck up a conversation, hey, guess what? You bought a friend, right? There's more to it than meets the eye. But the complexity of all of that takes a lot of time and a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting to be able to manage. And the last thing, about how I sort of went, how as a misfit I, came to be accepted by and still live Phi Delta Theta in my life, is thinking about interest versus position. One of the things that being a Phi taught me was, hey, look, we all got different ways of approaching this, but everybody's trying to row the boat in the same direction. So how do I cut out all the noise and focus on the signal? What's the one thing somebody's trying to tell me about who they are, who they want to be, and how they want to be in the world? You do these 3 things, and if you take a look very carefully, all of these 3 things are the exact things that are laid out by our ritual. Why we look to Miami University, why we do different things, why we have different symbols and icons in our room. That's what they're there for, is to help us try to nail these principles down and make those cardinal principles our own. So, in conclusion, being a misfit is probably the best thing you can be. The question is how much are you going to embrace your inner misfit to make the world your own? Thanks.